Okay, today I'm going to be doing a demonstration on baguette, also known as the French bread. Is one of the important bread components as far as French baking is concerned. We're going to be using basic ingredients like bread flour, salt, yeast, and lukewarm water. The temperature of the water has to be at 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius for the yeast to get activated. Okay, as for the weights and measurements for the dough, we're going to be using today 1 kg of flour. We're going to be using 20 grams of salt. We're going to be using 25 grams of yeast, and we're going to be using 600 grams of water. So these are the primary ingredients that we're going to be using for making the baguette. And the first stage is going to be the scaling, which I just mentioned, the weights. The second stage is going to be the mixing, where I'm going to be using a dough mixer to mix the dough. And the dough is going to be mixed in for at speed number 2 for about 3 to 5 minutes. And we'll probably do another mixing at speed 1 for about 5 more minutes. So in all, the dough will be actually mixed in for about 8 to 10 minutes, with the idea that we get a dough of a texture wherein we are able to see a clear light when the dough is kind of actually spread. Okay, so for the mixing stage, I've sieved the flour along with salt, and what I've done is I've taken a little bit of water and mixed in the yeast. I'm not going to combine the yeast and salt together because you don't want the yeast cells to die. So what we'll do is the salt and the flour is already mixed in into the mixer. We'll add the water and yeast mixture, and then we'll add in the water and make a dough. Before that, I just want to actually talk about a couple more things. There are about 10 steps in the entire process of the baguette. The first stage is the scaling, the second is the mixing, the third is the fermentation process, the fourth is the punching, benching, then scoring, and baking. In these processes, there's going to be a time involved. The fermentation process the first fermentation process is going to be about an hour, and the fermentation needs to be set at a temperature of about 27 degrees Celsius. Okay, now I'm just going to show where the dough is ready. If you see, I'm just actually stretching out the dough to see if we can see the light, and definitely the dough is completely ready, and the elasticity on the dough is also perfect. So what we need to do is we need to leave it for fermentation. So the next process is going to be leaving the dough for fermentation for about an hour. Okay, so before I actually cover the dough, I'm just going to make sure that my vessel is completely oiled so that the dough doesn't stick to the oil as soon as the fermentation takes place. And we will let the dough ferment for a good hour, and the temperature will be 27 degrees Celsius. So that will be the temperature that the dough will actually ferment, and it will double up in size. So we'll leave this for fermentation, and then we'll move on to the completed the fermentation process. The fermentation process includes wherein the yeast acts on the starches and the sugar, and then produces CO2 and alcohol. So right now you see the dough is doubled in size. So what we'll do is we'll take the dough off, and we'll go on to the next stage, and we'll punch the dough to make sure that we release the CO2 gas that's formed. So that's the next stage for before we start getting into to benching and Okay, so that's the dough ready for for punching in. When we've actually punched the toe, we've taken the CO2. We've kind of actually deflated the CO2 gas. Now it's ready for scaling, and then we'll go on to the next step of rounding and getting ready for benching and portioning. So that'll be the 3 steps that we'll have to follow before we go on to proofing, scoring, and baking. So this is actually a bench scaler which I'll use to divide the dough into equal quantities. The proportion of dough that we're going to be using for making the baguettes is 11 ounces, which will probably be close to 320 grams of dough that's going to be used for the baguette. Just keep this in mind when you're making the portions. You got to take into consideration 10 to 13% of the loss that's going to occur during baking. So that's the reason why you got to take a little bit of an additional quantity of the dough when you're ready to roll it. Now this dough, we're just going to go into something called as rounding the dough and making sure that it goes through the fermentation process one more time before we start actually rolling the dough and get ready for panning. So now we're getting ready to roll the dough. And as you see, we just got to make sure that we keep rolling it nice and tight, and keep using the fingertips to press so that there are no air pockets. So after the benching and proofing, we've actually gone into the stage of make-up and panning. So what we've done is we've taken the dough and divided them into 4 equal portions of 320 grams each, and we've rolled and made them into the baguette shape. So now actually this is got to be going into fermentation and proofing. So this will actually proof for about 40 minutes, and then afterwards we'll score them before we put it in for baking. So just keep this in mind when we're going to be doing the baking. The baguettes have to be scored. Otherwise, what will happen is the baguettes might actually crack open from the center. So it's the ideal way to make sure that the baguettes come out good is you got to score them before you put them in for baking. So we're down to the last 3 stages now. We've already got the proofing done. So we're going to be doing the scoring now. So the scoring will probably just take a sharp knife and just make 4 little grooves so that the baguette doesn't crack when on cooking. And I'm just trying and doing it at an angle so that when the baguettes kind of actually is cooking in the oven, it won't burst or it won't look uneven when it kind of actually cooks at that high temperature. So the temperature that we're going to be cooking today is for about 15 to 20 minutes. And we're going to be incorporating some steam as well. So for the first 3 minutes we're going to be putting in some steam, and then the baguette is going to be cooked at 425 degrees Fahrenheit. So once the baguette is cooked, we're going to be making sure that the baguette comes off on a cooling rack, and we'll cook it till it comes to a nice golden brown color. So there you see the baguettes that have just come out of the oven. It's got a nice golden brown, and if you knock, it's got a hard crust on top. And if you feel the crust on top is also nice and hard, and you see the bottoms as well, it's nice and golden brown. And for some time before we go into the final thing of